Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Election Day in Illinois, the 20th of March. And as you can see, I'm just a little disheveled and a little sleepy. Still taking the morning coffee. I'm still an addict. And I hope to go lifting and running a little bit, probably half an hour. I went to see two candidates last night. I saw Mitt Romney at 5 o'clock Monday evening from the campus of Bradley University. And later I went to see Rick Santorum at the Davis Brothers Family Pizza in East Peoria. I'd like to thank both Bradley and Davis Brothers for bringing in presidential candidates to Central Illinois. And I might even patronize Davis Brothers because even though regardless of how I feel about candidates, I do think that the discourse does the area good. First of all, the events, although they're both for Republican candidates, were very, very different types of events. The Bradley one had the Romney team set up things in advance. I know it was a campus event, so it's going to have a slightly different feel to it. But basically, Mitt Romney stood in the middle of a stage, and you can see photos of my blog, and went on. I should say he was introduced by Aaron Schock, our young Illinois 18th representative. I'm in the 18th now, but due to redistricting, I'll be moving to the 17th congressional district. Illinois lost a congressional district over redistricting period. And he was introduced, and they mostly focused on economic issues. They, especially Mr. Romney, especially said that President Obama was out of ideas, that he tried but just couldn't get it done. They tried to imply that the stimulus was a failure. It was $1 trillion. They did correctly point out that the Obama team thought that unemployment would stay above 8%, but what they didn't say is that this projection came when they first came into office before they had a chance to pass anything, that they had underestimated the depth of the recession. And what they also didn't say, as people like Paul Krugman did, is that the stimulus was too small. Yes, Krugman recommended roughly the same amount of stimulus, but over a 1 year period. And this stimulus is over a 2 year period, and as you know, a stimulus is effective according to the rate at which it's spent. It's a spending rate that counts, and of course over the duration. So the Obama team did underestimate the depth. What they also did not say is they did not say that we are now adding jobs every month where we were losing them. Now, we're not adding them quickly enough to make up for new job seekers and old people who previously lost their jobs. In order to recover quickly, this recession might last from start to finish a decade. Romney did mention that Obama bailed out GM. He did not mention that the start of the auto bailouts was a President Bush plan, and a President Bush plan that worked. Imagine this, defending a President Bush plan. And he also did not mention that, whereas he talks about drilling, that our domestic oil production or oil production of domestic sources is actually up, not down. So Mr. Romney, of course, did not mention that. And so I have to admit, he got under my skin quite a bit. I didn't yell anything. I just sort of sat there, shook my head. I did clap once because he did mention the school situation in Finland. Of course, he did mention that the teachers there were well paid. He did mention that the teachers there were extremely highly qualified, which of course I approve of. He did mention a lot of other things, though, that one of the things they focused there on Finland was equity. They also focused on not teaching to a test and not doing all this other testing. And where they did do a national comparison, they never judged teachers by the scores on a test, which is, well, sort of antithetical to what Mr. Romney wants. So I find it ironic that he mentioned schools, but didn't mention the program. The next thing is I went to the Rick Santorum rally in East Peoria, Davis Brother Family Pizza. That was held in a parking lot. Everybody was standing there. It was quite a different crowd. I did not, just from looking at the health of the people and genuinely what the people looked like, it was a very different crowd than Bradley University crowd. Didn't seem less affluent, um, more blue collar, if you will. And there, Santorum he did talk about economic freedom. He did talk about low taxes, but it was mostly what I would consider ego stroking for insecure people. He went on and on and on about how the United States really, really, really was a special place, and how he was closer to Reagan, and how they said in 1976 Reagan didn't have a chance. 1980 they said, oh, you nominate Reagan, he won't have a chance. He did, talk a little bit about abortion. He talked a lot about Obamacare and how bad it was. He didn't give any solutions of his own. And then he talked about Iran a lot. He did mention they were Persian. They were not historically, he says, and opposed to Jews. And he mentioned the theocratic government, which frankly I detest too. I think it's a horrible government. But then he also mentioned gas prices. And get this, he's rattling the saber about Iran, and then he complains about high gas prices. Come on. And that's something neither Romney nor Santorum mentioned, is the role of speculation in gas prices, speculation in petroleum futures. Never mentioned that. It's a funny thing, huh? And then he talked about, how great the country was, how we really were truly exceptional, and he talked about the immigrants coming here before these entitlement programs. Never called these entitlement programs Social Security. He never called it Medicare because, well, those are popular, right? So he just never mentioned them by name, just talked about entitlements and, how America was great and before them, and how immigrants came before there were any handouts. They came only for freedom. Things like the Homestead Acts and the various land giveaways somehow were under his radar. He did mention that at the start of the Republic, the life expectancy was about 40 years, which is right, that we were a primarily agrarian society, which is right. But he said, over time, presto, we now have this industrialized society, and we now have almost a doubling of our life expectancy over a relatively short time. He never mentioned that a lot of this is because of, in fact, almost all of it was because of science and government programs and sanitation. And the Industrial Revolution, and he seems to imply that all this happened because of America. No. This crowd here isn't going to, pick that up. You did hear a couple of things. I did hear one isolated Obama's a socialist. I heard a couple of bomb-a-rans. I also saw people raising their hands in prayer, that kind of thing there. A little bit church revival stuff. There was lots of mention of faith, values, family. A lot of that, much more so here. In fact, I didn't really see much of any of it at the Romney rally. So it was a very different crowd. And believe it or not, at the Santorum rally, they were passing around a can for donations and, yes, a milk jug. A milk jug with a narrow entrance. Really, he did mention his website, and one of the speakers was Kathy Salvi, who is a wife of a right-wing state legislator, former state legislator, who lives in Chicago area. She did mention about getting on Facebook and how confusing that was, or how new it was. Come on. Different crowd, I guess, than a college crowd. But overall, I'm glad I went. And overall, I have to admit, Romney really got under my skin in a way that Rick Santorum did not. And I remember leaving, telling my wife, who was there working rally as a university official, saying, well, it's not every day you get to shake the hand of somebody who's going to finish second in the general election. A Republican overheard that and said something. And I said something back. She said, you want 4 more years of what we have now? And I said, I like 200,000 plus jobs a month. Well, to each their own. Yeah, I called her an idiot under my breath. Maybe louder than I would have liked to have said. I don't like being in civil, but oh well. Thanks for listening.